Welcome to F&I Today with Becky Chernek. Brought to you by eLend Solutions.
Welcome to F&I Today. I'm your host, Becky Chernek. Today we welcome back Rodney O'Rourke. We'll be discussing the advantages of sending your F&I person to school. Believe it or not, some dealers promote sales personnel into F&I without giving them the proper training. This effectively leaves them to figure things out on their own. Not only does this create havoc in your F&I department, but it can also result in customer complaints and increased liability. Even if you have previously sent your F&I personnel to a workshop, when was the last time you sent them through a refresher course? The industry is changing at warp speed, and it's important to ask yourself, what are some of the ways you are keeping up with the changing marketplace? Welcome back, Rodney O'Rourke. It's a pleasure to have you back on the F&I Today show. So let's talk about this F&I training. And what I mean by that, we were talking a little while ago about how dealers are either not sending their F&I people to a workshop, the new F&I people to workshops, or if they attend a workshop, it's later on, 3 years, 4 years later on, they're not sending them to a refresher course of any kind. And as you know, this industry is like changing at warp speed.
It is.
What are your thoughts there?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on again. It's funny because in dealerships on a regular basis, we see F&I managers going through the box, and we have new F&I managers, and we send them into F&I school a lot of times, and sometimes it's delayed in doing that. The interesting part about our industry is it's kind of a learn-on-the-job industry. The problem with that is there's a lot of stuff that you need to learn that isn't necessarily on the job. A perfect example of that, is keeping up with regulations, laws, and compliance. And so when you're getting F&I people to F&I school, they're going to bring up the latest training. But again, that's just kind of the start. After that, then what?
Well, that's what, has me confused, because I get phone calls all the time. I have an online platform. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I get calls from F&I people that have just been placed in positions that are asking about my platform, the training, that sort of thing. And I do believe that maybe that they should also make an investment in their own training. Do dealers expect their F&I people to invest in their own training, and do most F&I people invest in their own training? How does all that work?
Well, I look at it like this. A lot of people don't actually invest in their own training. A lot of dealers don't, take the time or money, and it's not normally about money. Normally it's about time. A lot of times the dealership sees, that person is going to have to leave the dealership to go get trained. Mm-hmm. And that's always a problem to have one man short or one lady short in a car dealership. So the neat part about technology now is you can bring that training to the desk. Your platform is a perfect example of that. That's training that they can bring directly to their desk and do it as they go. LoJack, in fact, has training modules that are electronic. Okay. And we, design them to be able to pause, go finish selling a car and making a deal, and come back and pick it up where you left off. Mm-hmm. So there are lots of different ways electronically that we can fill that need. The question, not so much is the dealership concerned about that, but are you as an employee concerned about that? Because there are two types of people in the car business. There are people that have a job, there are people that have a career. And I think if you have a career, you need to ask yourself, am I investing in myself?
Well, maybe it's a two-way street. So for an example, perhaps maybe that dealer might even sponsor their F&I person. And maybe the F&I person, sort of kind of pays also for that training, but it's reimbursed back after 3 or 4 months of being on the job. I can understand where the dealer's coming from. They say, we send all our people to all this F&I training, and then they come back, and then they leave us. And I can tell you how many times that I've sent my F&I people to training, and they last maybe 2 or 3 months, and then out the door it goes. But it has to be viewed, I guess, as a long-term commitment, and making that decision, that hiring decision, is important. You
Absolutely.
Just can't put anyone in that F&I office.
No, you're right. And retention is a whole nother show when it comes to employee retention.
Right.
Obviously, a dealership is concerned about investing in people and then they leave. Mm-hmm. But at the same point, let me ask you, as a person in the career, Do you want to invest in yourself to make yourself better? And the funny part is you sell for a living. We sell for a living, all right?
Right.
Well, maybe you need to sell your dealer on paying for part or all of the training electronically to keep you at your store.
I just blows me away, frankly, that dealers aren't taking the time to make sure that they're vested, that they properly vetted their employee, making sure that they have that proper training before they sit that F&I person in that office.
It's
There's
exposure.
too many. Am I right?
It is.
I
It's a
mean,
lot of exposure for the dealer. And I'll tell you, regulations and laws change so fast that it's hard for dealership. It's not realistic for a dealership to keep track of that.
I think sometimes they want to bury their head in the sand and hope like heck it's never going to happen to them. I think that's where the mentality is. And it's frustrating because I know that sometimes things happen to good people all the time.
Sure.
Just because, they made a bad decision because it was a knowing problem, not necessarily a doing problem, still doesn't make it right.
No.
It's still non-compliant. And there's a lot more headaches where that starts, right? Where that whole thing begins.
Absolutely.
So why don't dealers understand the importance of making sure that their F&I person, of all people in the store, has the proper training?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because we always bring up F&I because F&I touch so much private information. And the funny part is, it's not just F&I that touches private information. And that's huge exposure to the dealer. And that's a good question. Why does the dealer not take the time or the money to make sure that's done? Well, I can't speak for the dealers, but what I can say is what I've heard a lot of people say is, you know what, it's not affecting us right now.
Well, I see how it affects. And based off of my experience and being in dealerships throughout the United States, it can be a compliance thing, but it's also a performance thing.
Sure it is.
So do we do, I had another interview with Adam Aarons, and he's a dealer who has 2 Subaru dealerships. And what he was talking about was role play and how important it is to train. I mean, we all want to do something, we all want that performance.
Sure.
But we might have to do something in order to get to that performance.
I love role play. And the uncomfortable part about role play.
No one likes that.
No, and the reason why they don't like it is because they don't like doing it in front of their peers. It puts a lot more pressure on you. But if you're comfortable doing that, how are you going to react in front of a customer?
So exactly. So it's going to be within the culture. I know that there might be some other training experts out there in the industry that say, well, role play is not necessarily necessary. But try telling that to an athlete on a football field. I doubt
Sure.
that's what you're going to hear back.
No, and see how many athletes are paying for, private training to get to certain areas. I mean, you have certain athletes that are getting ready for a draft that are elite athletes. That are getting ready for the NFL draft that are training again.
Right.
Okay? Tim Tebow is a perfect example of that. This guy had completely changed the way he passed the football. The entire time he did it through college, he spent 120 days changing his fundamentals, his technique, just to be more attractive to the draft, and it didn't work for him at the end. He didn't make it in football. Now, turns out he's making it great in baseball. But it's a remarkable thing to watch such a talented athlete struggle, but work so hard to try and get to a certain spot. So I think it's a big deal to make yourself the best. The funny part about what we do is we learn over time in whatever we do. In the car business, we learn a lot of times from listening to other people. I think one great first step is watching a show like this, because anything that's going to take what's going on in the industry and bring it in front of you is a great first step.
Well, I can tell you, when I first got hired and promoted into F&I, thank goodness, I had a tremendous amount of training. I had a very, very, very strong foundation, which helped me throughout the years to become better in what I do. But not only that, but the dealer had no issue at all in doing follow-up training. It wasn't just a one-time thing. We're just going to do it this one time and never see another training workshop ever again. That's not what his thought process was, and thank goodness for that, I can tell you. So yeah, we learn better skills. We're able to do better with our performance and in managing our presentations better, overcoming objections with products and that sort of thing. So what other ways do F&I people have in helping their skill set and helping them to stay abreast of what's going on in the industry today?
Well, there's really a couple of ways of doing it. One is, of course, the different magazines that are out. There are numerous different industry publications that you can stay on top of topics. But there are also different conferences. There's a compliance conference that's regional that goes around the country all year. CBT has a conference.
Oh yeah, coming up soon.
Absolutely. NADA has a conference.
Right.
These are different areas. I mean, NADA has workshops all through their conferences. And the last time I was at NADA, the one thing I made sure I paid for was the extra pass for the sessions.
And I also know that NCM 20 Group, I want to go ahead and mention them. We have an excellent workshop on desking and F&I integration and how important it is to go ahead and merge the two together, having everyone working together side by side to maximize sales and obviously profits as well. So there's a lot of different venues that are available for dealers to help their F&I people progress in what they do.
Absolutely. In fact, I really don't even think it's because dealers don't want that to happen. A lot of times, everybody gets tunnel vision. Everybody's running for that 30-day number, and time goes on, and
Sure.
we lose thought or process where we want to go. So I'm not even going to lay that on the dealers. I kind of look at the employees and say, if you want to do that, set it up, pitch it to your dealer. I mean, there's some great tools, like, for example, Mosaic Compliance is a great tool that people can, dealership can bring in for keeping everybody current on, what they need to know when it comes to regulation, when it comes to laws, different changes in our industry, and even the fact of, they have a compliance officer certification even, which is a huge deal. But it's not an expensive tool for a dealership to bring in to make sure that his assets are covered, because let's be honest, his exposure is what all of his employees are saying and doing with that private information.
It really starts at the top.
It does.
And it does. Again, I was talking to another F&I person, and I said, why not do an in-dealership training? I mean, you have several different stores, bring everyone together. His comment to me was, wow, that would be a luxury. And it shouldn't be a luxury. It should be, that's what we do, this is how we do it, this
Absolutely.
is our culture, and this is what we want to do, and this is long-term thinking, that sort of thing, right?
Well, sure, and it's going to limit the exposure, but also in a lot of those avenues, you're going to get better selling, and you're going to sell products more, effectively. The funny part about compliance is, as much as we hate to discuss it, okay, a compliant F&I department is going to allow to sell and keep more money on the books, because their chargebacks are going to go down, they're going to sell more ethically, and it's not going to keep them or hinder them from selling products. They're just going to stick and be happier customers at the end.
I guess, too, at the same token, it is less customer complaints. You're dealing with banks.
Absolutely.
You have to understand your bank guidelines. You have to understand your niche. You know how to get deals purchased, how to work with that bank, how to build those relationships.
Absolutely.
And how critical is that? Sending your F&I person to an F&I fundamental school where it trains and teaches them how to work with those banks, those relationships, deal structure, leasing, everything that it takes to go ahead and manage F&I is just, I think, major critical today.
Well, let's talk about reserve markup, okay? That's something that's becoming more and more scrutinized by the CFPB to the banks.
Yep.
And the banks are turning around and asking the dealers, okay, for input. And they're not just casually asking the dealers, they're sending demand letters to say, I need to know what's going on here. And a lot of times the dealers don't even know what to say. That's where they need partners like a Mosaic or another company that can come in and keep track of all that stuff as it's changing. The CFPB is not going away, in my opinion. It doesn't matter who's president. I don't see that going away. I see more and more scrutiny being on the banking industry, and in turn that I think directly reflects on automobile dealers.
I was reading something from Jack Tracy with NAF Association, National Auto Finance Association. What he was sharing with us is that perhaps maybe the CFPB will be more of a regulatory environment, and not necessarily stepping into overseeing that the regulations are in place. I don't know how
and it's really hard to see the future of that.
Yeah.
Under the previous administration, it went rampant.
Yeah.
We don't know
sure
with this
did.
new administration. I mean, he's still picking top picks right now.
Yeah.
But at the same point, as automotive professionals, we need to be prepared for anything that happens in our industry, good or bad.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Well, you know what, Rodney, thank you again for being on the F&I Today show, and I'm sure I'll have you back in here real soon. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for having me.
So as Rodney points out, training is a key component to success in F&I and certainly nothing to take lightly. Promoting sales personnel into F&I without the proper training is just foolish practice. The industry is changing rapidly, and offering your F&I person with continuing education course will likely reduce liability and increase overall profits. Well, thank you for joining me on F&I Today. Be sure to come back next week right here on the CBT Automotive Network for our next edition of F&I Today. I'm Becky Chernek, and I'll see you next week.
F&I Today, brought to you by eLend Solutions.